Hi, in this episode I'll be talking to my friend Paul Rose. He's a well-known TV personality for both BBC and the National Geographic channels. Over at BREW, Paul talks about what work goes into the planning and development of a scientific level expedition and how he keeps warm in the horribly cold waters of the polar regions. Do you fancy a brew?
Hi Andy.
Hiya buddy, how's it going?
All right, thank you. How's things?
I'm good mate, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, well, thanks for setting it up a bit earlier than you normally would do. It's just I've really been a bit pushed for time lately, and I've got this Nat Geo thing in evenings quite regularly, and I got one tonight. So this is handy for me. So thanks, mate. Very good.
I'll be honest. It's been tipping it down all day here, so it was kind of like get in, finish work, and get home. Yeah. So you're busy doing quite a few of these kind of things, like webinars and all that kind of stuff. Then
I am. Yep. I mean, it's one of these things where typically I haven't been able to do them in recent years because I've been away.
Yeah.
Or if I have been invited to do them, I haven't really been geared up for the virtual working, doing podcasts and stuff like that. Or even if I've been away and had to say no to something and then been offered the opportunity to perhaps connect by video. And I've always said, no, forget it. It just doesn't seem worth it. Yeah. But suddenly it's a new life, isn't it?
It's very odd.
I've been enjoying the podcast. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
The lad or the bloke who got me into diving about 4 years ago, every time we were away on an expedition, this is the only way you communicate, like FaceTime or Skype calls. Yeah. And I'm like, I hate seeing my own face in the mirror when I'm doing my teeth. So I don't want to be doing this. And then it was a natural progression. He always used to ring me from Iraq or Oman where he was working away. So we chat like this quite often and it just became the norm.
We obviously put all of our expeditions back till next year.
Yeah.
And even then, I mean, we were thinking maybe start early, January, February, but I think that's going to be too early. So, during this period, we've had to get very busy with other stuff, big education programs and teeing up all of our, community sites and all the rest of it.
Right.
And I started to do these. I did a load of big, I do a lot of speaking engagements, Andy. And normally I get excited about the going up on stage and getting ready, making sure everything's going to work and get fired up for this big event. And it was a bit funny when I first started doing these to just be me in here with the computer,
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
But they've been going really well.
I've still put a bit of aftershave on when I'm interviewing a girl, though, just in case. Yeah. You never know.
Exactly, yeah. All good. So, and I look through stuff, happy. And I've been doing quite a lot of these podcasts of all kinds of different themes. So well, I've got a cup of tea, I'm happy.
Happy days, mate. Right. Paul Rose, welcome to Fancy Brew Podcast. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks, Andy. Very good to be here.
I hear you're not just up the road, though, in Cumbria anymore. Where are you in the world?
I'm in Geneva, and I've been here since March. I was working in Norway and the Seychelles, and then when it came time to come home, we weren't sure where to go. We've got a place here in Geneva and my place up in Windermere. Yeah. And we came here to Geneva. We've got family here, and what's been really good is we've been enjoying the very organised, very Swiss approach to COVID.
Has numbers been quite low in that over there?
They have, yeah. The numbers have been low, and there's been a very, reassuring, trustworthy way of managing it. The Swiss people, they have a smart way with the government. They tend not just to have one prime minister. I've forgotten what they call it, but there's 7 of them. Right. They seem to vote every 5 minutes on something, and so there's a lot of faith and trust in their leadership. So when there was guidance early on about what to do and how it was, everybody followed it. Everybody was being very good about it. And that helped us. We'd just come back from the Seychelles and all of a sudden what was happening. So it felt good. So we stayed here, but heading back to Cumbria in a couple of weeks.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have to meet up because I'm only down the road in Wigan, so in Lancashire. So
Yes, mate, please.
We're up there all the time. If it's not there, it's sort of North Wales around Anglesey, that sort of neck of the woods, because they're about 2 hours either way, give or take, depending where we're going.
All I can think about, Andy, is getting back to the fells and having some great stonking walks, and then going down to Chestle Cove and having some dives. That's a few 2 or 3 days at Chesil Cove. That's all I want to do.
We went a few years ago. We're proper digressing off the script here, but no one cares. We went to a few years ago. We did Swanage Pier in the morning and then Chesil Cove in the afternoon. And the viz was horrendous. It was absolutely honking. So everyone was saying, oh, there's like landing craft and there's this and that and the other. Me and Ali got out, and that bank to walk back up is horrendous, isn't it? And we were like, I thought it's supposed to be a good dive site, this. I've not seen a thing. I think we'd just gone round in a circle and then just went, nah, we can't be asked for this. We'll get out. But
the funny thing is, I've been looking online, and the reports from Chesil Beach Watch have been absolutely brilliant. There's, great visibility, calm conditions, and lots of life. So I just hope it stays.
Well, do you want to give us a bit of an intro for those who don't know who you are, to obviously lead us into some sort of conversation, and we'll get on with having this brew then, shall we?
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, well, I'm Paul Rose, and I'm the expedition leader for National Geographic Pristine Seas expeditions. Our project is we look for and then explore and help protect the last wild, pristine places in the ocean. We've had 33 expeditions, created 22 marine protected areas, which is over 6 million square kilometres. Prior to that, I was the base commander for the British Antarctic Survey in Antarctica for 10 years. Prior to that, I was working at Impact, of course, up there in Cumbria. Yeah. And prior to that, I was in the States where I was working for the US Navy, teaching diving.
Flipping heck, that's a career and a half. You should be about 800 years old.
Yeah, I am.
How did you get into that sort of expedition work? Because for me, that's what excites me, whether it be seeing you guys on the telly or just the sort of mini expeds that I've talked to you about before, that we do, just a group of us off to Malta or to Croatia or whatever, or even the military stuff, taking 20 people out to learn how to dive somewhere. But how did you get into sort of being a base commander?
Well, I couldn't do anything else really, Andy. I was terrible at school, and when I was 11, I grew up in Romford, Essex, and that's a long way from the natural wild places, but very close to certain other wild places. And I grew up with a bunch of Herbert mates, and we were all happy together. But in a classic sort of race to the bottom, we couldn't get along with teachers or learn. And I particularly had a lot of trouble with books and learning off of blackboards and the classic being in a bloody classroom. And I found it very difficult indeed. And in fact, I can still smell that overheated, painted Victorian radiator I used to sit next to. Just couldn't do it. And I was very sort of claustrophobic in school. I was good at sports and good at being away from school. And when I was 11, on television was Jacques Cousteau and Hans and Lottie Huss, and of course Mike Nelson and the Sea Hunt. And there was Cousteau having brilliant adventures around the world on Calypso, which I was blown away by, not because of the science, but because of the sheer, as you say, exploration and adventure side of it. And Hans and Lottie Huss were taking those fantastic black and white shark images, and I still remember the wonderful pictures of them both sitting back on the reef, looking at their notepads underwater. And I realized, wow, these two are working underwater. That's their place. Yeah. And then Mike Nelson, from Sea Hunt. I mean, he was the others were real heroes, but Mike was a fictional hero in Sea Hunt, and he was having proper blokes adventures every week on the television and rescuing pilots from crashed jets in the sea and rescuing miners from flooded mines, and all the beautiful women in the world wanted Mike to teach a dive. And I thought, well, that's for me. But no diving in the family. I didn't even know how to do it. And then when I was 14, our geography teacher took us all to the Brecon Beacons, and I fell in love with walking and hiking and being in the rivers and navigating and generally looking after myself outside. I was only 14, but I thought I can do this. And so I realized that at last that was something to do, that I knew that was going to be my core drive through life, but I had no idea how to turn that into work.
That's been a common theme, I think, with a lot of people that I've chatted with through doing this podcast, is I'm much like you. I didn't enjoy school. Although what they used to call like woodwork and metalwork, I thrived on that. And then the sports field, I really loved the athletics, playing rugby. But I longed for the weekends where I'd go out fishing or I'd go out riding my bike and seeing the countryside, And then I perhaps had a sort of misspent teenage life. I didn't get the opportunities. My dad was a sportsman. My mum followed him around. So we didn't go up into the fells, even though we were an hour and a half drive at best away. We didn't do a lot of wild swimming or wild camping. It was always, let's go and watch my dad play cricket again or play rugby in the winter. So I feel if I'd have had that direction, if Jack Cousteau was on the telly in the early 90s when I was a young lad, I perhaps might have had that slightly different direction. And I'm pretty envious, mate, of most people I've had on here. But it's good because I get to sort of see where they're up to and that can steer my life. Now I'm only 40, so I've clearly got perhaps 50 years in me to steer my life in a different direction, haven't I? Yeah. So your first dive was on Chesil Cove as well, wasn't it?
It was, Chesil, because I took an apprenticeship. I was very lucky. I passed metalwork O-level, which remains my highest academic qualification to date.
Brilliant.
And that meant, yeah, and I was very lucky. I got an apprenticeship at Ford's, which was brilliant. Yeah. A really great for apprenticeship as a toolmaker at Ford's at Dagenham. And that's where I learned to dive. They had a relationship with the Ilford BSAC branch and also Walthamstow. So I was dead keen. So I attended, I think it was Tuesdays at Ilford and Thursdays at Walthamstow. So I could hurry up and get in the sea, get all my, stuff in the quarries, obviously get the logbook done, get the snorkel covering and all that done down at Durdledore, and then get diving. And it was Easter 1969, Chesil Cove, and I shall never forget it. I had like everybody, homemade suit, and I think we all did the same. I think we all made them, at home we're cutting it out of the paper pattern, and then with the tape, I'm sure we all put yellow tape on a la Cousteau.
Really?
And I remember going in, and it was a gorgeous day, but a bit sleety, but a real sense of adventure that. Yeah. Well, I remember it really felt like an adventurous moment to get in there as a diver.
Awesome.
And first going down on the banks and seeing the crabs and the cuttlefish and the weed. And it was there, it was there that I realized that I couldn't have described it at the time, but I was alive in the world's most exciting, largest, least understood, least protected ecosystem. And there I was as a diver. And I should never forget that feeling. So I'm in Switzerland at the minute, but when I get back to the lakes, I'll give it a couple of weeks, then I'll get down there. I can feel that dive. I can't wait,
This base commander job, tell us a little bit about that, because it sounds pretty epic, that cold, if nothing else.
Well, I was in the States for 13 years, and it was tool making that got me to the States, working for Johnson Outboards initially as a die-cast die maker, and the easy, reasonable transfer of skills from press tool making to die-cast die making. Yeah. And this was 74, and in 74 in England, there was quite a lot of strikes. I'd come out of my apprenticeship and felt great and wanted to, get on with exciting things. I didn't feel like doing night shift at Ford, so I got a job at Lesney Products. Lesney Products, they make the Matchbox toys, and I was making molds for the toys.
Right.
But it was all a bit dull, really, I was dead fit, wanted to be a diver, wanted to get my climbing sorted out, wanted more from life, that thing. Yeah. And I saw this ad in the Sunday newspapers, and it said Midwest Marine Company is looking for, and it was an enormous long list of electricians, tool makers, mold makers, machinists. So I applied, got a job, went to Waukegan, Illinois. Wow. And there I picked up that wonderful, at the time, really enthusiastic Midwest American thing where everybody I was working with in the factory was either racing motorbikes or rebuilding old cars or doing fantastic sports or something, or they were divers and climbers, and they all had big, fun lives, whereas the blokes I'd left behind in the factory in England didn't have big, fun lives. They went to the pub, So I thrived on that, got my diving sorted out, became a PADI instructor very quickly, which was great fun. My number's 12314, so I always remember that number, and started to do the obvious thing of teaching, teaching in the high schools, teaching anybody I could. There's a Lake County underwater recovery team, and I started to teach them. Right. And that meant I was thought, wow, I'm a diving instructor here, but it was only an part-time thing. Then I got my climbing sorted out. I've always been an enthusiastic climber, and I started at the same time to get my guides qualification going. So I was traveling out to the Pacific Northwest seemingly every 5 minutes to the North Cascades Alpine School, becoming a mountain guide. And eventually I got enough other jobs that I could leave the factory. And that was the moment. You know, I got Chicago Police Department, Lake County Sheriff's Department, and I had all these running, and I had this feeling that it would never support me, but it might do if I put more time in.
Yeah.
And during that time, I got the contract to teach scuba diving at Great Lakes Naval Training Center. So I thought, right, that's it. So I left that, and I've never had a proper job since.
It is a scary sort of world. I run my own little business, and I make all right money. You know, I've got a very comfortable life. I've got a very beautiful, a very intelligent wife that dives. So I've got a partner to dive with all the time. We've got an easy, very easy life. And the thought of dropping that to chase a dream that may or may not pay off, and it's an expensive dream, isn't it? Even you know, if you want to break into TV, all the qualifications that you need, that's before you've even got to the guy who runs the television show. Before you've even got to his front door, you've got to have all these. And we're talking tens of thousands of pounds, aren't we now? So it must be an epic decision for anyone.
Sometimes asked what the best investment I've made, and I often say it was my PADI instructor ticket and all the things that went with it, because I was then independent. Yeah. And then, you know, I did some years of teaching diving and getting my guiding finally sorted out. And then I was guiding as well. So I had a good one-man business, really. I was teaching diving, doing small commercial jobs like hull cleaning and all that kind of thing, and guiding in the North Cascades, Ecuador, and up in Alaska on Mount McKinley, Denali. And it was there I actually bumped into a guy who'd had a hell of a time on Denali, and he was coming down that had a really terrible weather. And he turned out to be a Brit, and I was having a chat, and he'd asked me if I'd heard of the British Antarctic Survey, because I was coming back to England after 13 years, and I hadn't. Right. And they were looking for diving officers. I thought, well, yeah, diving Antarctica. And there is a natural progression, you know, from like guiding in the greater ranges and diving around the world to then the polar regions. So I applied when I got back to England, but they didn't want me as a diving officer, but they did need what they call field assistants, which are basically mountain guides for scientists in Antarctica. So I got a job as a field assistant working in Mary Bird Land, which is the American side of Antarctica. Yeah, I really loved it. It was a long, complex project, 100 and something days in the field. And then at the end of that project, went up because they needed someone to help on Mount Erebus in Antarctica, did that. Came back, then went south again the following year on an Antarctic Peninsula project on the British side. Then I went back to Antarctica working for NASA with their Mars lander robot. They needed to test it on Mount Erebus, and because I knew Erebus, I led that. And while I was there, they offered me the job of base commander at British Antarctic Survey. So I flew around the world to Rothero, the beautiful base Rothero, and I was the base commander there for 10 years.
Mega. How'd you cope with being away so long?
Well, it can be very mixed. I mean, those seasons, those Antarctic seasons, were about 6 or 7 months for me. Yeah. And then in the northern summer, you're really busy getting the sea sort of writing up the season you just did, preparing for the next one, and recruiting people and all that. So it wasn't much time off. So tricky times all round. And when I was away, it depended. Sometimes if the season was going well and life was good all round, then missing home wasn't too bad. But if we're having a really rough season, or if there were snags at home, then it was really painful to be away. You can't deny it. And it still is now. I mean, I'm now at sea for, I think 7 weeks is about the longest we've been away at sea on Pristine Seas. Yeah. But they're long times, because there's 7 weeks at sea, but because I tend to get there a week early, stay there a week late, so you're away for a couple of months. Yeah. Plus that enormous amount of build-up pre-expedition. So they're tough times. You can't deny they're difficult times.
Do you find that you're busy 100% of the time, other than when you're getting your head down?
Very much. Yeah, I like to be busy, and I think that's one of my tricks during this COVID period. You know, if you're used to working in challenging conditions, then you accept that there are times when you can't move. It might be a big storm at sea, it might be a big storm on land, and you can't change that storm. You know that eventually it will go through. Maybe take many, many days, but it will go through. So you just need to organise what you can organise, and be productive, what I call useful or productive. And so that's what I've been doing. Is I'm used to being busy, so I'm continuing busy now.
The only comparison I'd have is 2008. I was out in Afghanistan for 6-7 months, and we were busy for about 10% of the time. So 90% of the time, you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't do anything. We couldn't go for a run, not really, not all the time, or do much. And then certainly when somebody got injured, they cut all the communications off, so there's no internet, no telephone home. So they were lonely and sort of hard times mentally as much as physically, because you couldn't do much. So someone like me who's climbing the walls trying to find something to do, it was horrific. But I kind of made then the opportunity, because I've got this metalwork and sort of stuff background. I went into the metal shop and just started making little gun cabinets and stuff for people and all sorts of stuff. So I think keeping busy is that sort of key, isn't it? When you've got a lot of time away from home, but you don't want to use that mental capacity to be missing home so much.
Yeah, dead right.
Obviously, with you sort of your background in engineering as such, and then as the base commander doing a lot of logistic works and stuff. But what qualifications do you need to do your job now? We're working for the BBC or National Geographic.
Well, you need what they used to call it. It was the Media Scuba HSE Part 4. Remember that? I forgot what it's called now.
I think it's HSE Pro Scuba now.
Pro Scuba, yeah, Scuba. So that's the minimum that people need, and you can understand why, because it's a whole different sort of concept working underwater. So for me, I'm a PADI instructor, as I say, and in the old days, you became known as a master scuba diver trainer, I think, if you could teach all of the specialties.
Right.
And I have done. Yeah. I'm still an active PADI instructor, but I'm not at teaching status anymore. So I need to go back, and I think this year, or probably next year now, I'll go and get my teaching status redone, because I like that sticker on my card.
Yeah.
And then I've had some old Navy rebreather qualifications, and I redid those a few years ago for BBC with the great man Phil Short.
Yeah.
Done quite a lot of cave diving many years ago with Wes Skiles down in Florida, and as you know, he died a few years ago, poor guy. And but so then Phil Short sorted out my cave diving as well. And then, of course, I've got the usual nitrox tickets and things like that. So that's all you need for that kind of work. And then for me, because I'm working at sea most of the year, then I still do my HSE divers medical. Actually, our regulations in Nat Geo, we could actually get by with the self-declaration standard, say, sport diver medical.
Yeah.
But I really it's a bit of a personal challenge for me, because the HSE medical, as you know, is a bit of a tough one.
Yeah, so the Harvard step test can be a bit tricky, can't it?
Yeah, I do it every year, and I like to do that because it's a bit of a thing for me every year. Don't lose that. So that's it, really. And then I've got my chamber operator's ticket as well.
Right. There's
a few of us on board. We've got a very good diving medical officer on the expeditions. And of course, he's chamber operated, but there's a few of us also that are, me and our main underwater cameraman, Manu in particular. Right. So that means we've always got cover for our chambers. We've got 2 chambers. One is a 2-man chamber, and one is the 1-man hyperlight, and we can all run them. So we just keep up on the qualifications as necessary.
It's quite busy to get all them tickets in it. It's quite a lot involved. It's not just like just turn up, have a quick death by PowerPoint and then tick it off at the end. It's a few weeks.
You've really got to have them, and in particular, you've got to. It's one thing having the tickets, but you've got to be confident in the skills. And so when we arrive and get everything on the ship and get everything commissioned, then I really enjoy that sort of blowing the cobwebs off and just making
refamiliarization sort of thing.
That's right, that I can run everything.
I suppose skill fade can be quite big on that then, because how often someone in the chamber? Probably very rare, isn't it? So if you don't get used to just rerunning it up and prepping it and doing stuff, I suppose you don't want to be sat there reading the manual, do you, while someone's ticking away?
Absolutely not. So we're good on that kind of thing, and we're sharp on it. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get into the TV work? Was that a natural progression for you, or?
That's a really good one. I came back I was base commander from 92 to 2002. And shortly after I finished, I was working for the oil industry in the Middle East. I was health and safety guy in the mountains for exploration logistics. So I was working in Pakistan, Saudi, and the Iran-Iraq border. When I came back from one of those trips, I was also at the time, it was my first time as vice president for the Royal Geographical Society. And the BBC used to come to RGS headquarters in Kensington to get technical advice or ideas on certain television projects.
Right.
And it could be anything. It could be quite technical, such as we're supporting a team that are going to be diving in Lake Titicaca, very high altitude diving. What do we need to know about it? Or it might be historical references and things like that. And I was always love to help them. And the BBC would, come in and get help from me. And then one fine day they showed up and asked me if I would give them a really fast tour of the society on camera. But I was super busy. I mean, we had a conference that evening, so I reluctantly said yes. I whizzed them around the society and told them everything I knew about bits and pieces. I mean, it was really quick, 20 minutes. And then the great Nicola Lees, who'd organised that, she was the development person, took it back to BBC and said, hey, we're looking for someone to present science and factual programs. And I think we found our man, Paul Rose. So I took it and I was happy to swap the Middle East oil exploration work for the BBC work.
I think I would as well.
Yes.
Imagine if you'd have mugged them off. No, I'm too busy. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah.
We wouldn't be chatting now, would we?
No, probably not.
I've probably bumped into you half a dozen times in Windermere and just gone straight past you. Oh, well, how can I phrase this? Clearly you love the job. But
yes.
How does it compare? Because I know you really enjoy like the Antarctic, don't you? The scenery and the tranquility of it. How do the two jobs compare to you?
They're very comparable. I mean, we work in the Arctic and in the Antarctic, so I've been back to both places regularly, but they feel very comparable because the polar regions are very simple. White and blue or white and black. Yeah. And I've always liked the big expanse, simple scenery. I find that very restful. And as you know, life at sea is like that. It really is. I mean, the dives can be complex, but when you're up on the ship, on the boat, it's a very simple life. It's the sea and the sky and very simple colors. And so I like that. They're both very peaceful places for me, and they both are adventurous. There's a lot of work to be done there. So they both are equally comparable.
What I was thinking about when you were talking then is we had a honeymoon a couple of years ago. We went to Paris. Oh, yeah. And I didn't feel restful at all there. I don't know if you've ever been before, but you struggle to see a horizon because the buildings are so close together and so high. I imagine many big cities are like that. And I didn't feel as at ease as I have done before on board a ship or perhaps even in the desert, just at one with the world and absorbing what's going on, the smells and the sights.
Mind you, Andy, I'm not sure that honeymoons are meant to be restful, are they?
That's a fair point, yeah. So who have you met along the way that sort of sticks out, sort of big personalities to you? Not necessarily the biggest name, but I mean, like, who's really sort of impacted your life along your sort of route with what you're doing now?
First person that really impacted my life, aside from watching television, was Mr. Gray, our geography teacher, because he was the one who took us to Brecon Beacons when I was 14. And in school, he was just another suited, tough school teacher who I had no relationship with whatsoever. But then as we left the school and the closer we got to Brecon Beacons, he became this really motivated, happy, cagoule-wearing, enthusiastic, fun bloke. And I blooming loved him. And it was him that inspired me. Once we got there and he showed me how to read a map and a compass, and I had no idea that I was doing mathematics, but I found it dead easy to work out positions and routes, and I had a natural affinity to good routes up and safe routes descending and in the water. And he praised me, and it was the first time I'd actually been sort of looked after by a teacher, I think, on my terms. So Mr. Gray was the man who really got me going on a decent path. So I always think of Mr. Gray. I mean, he was a geography teacher, so maybe it's no surprise I then became, you know, the Royal Geographical Society in London became our spiritual home.
Have you ever had a chance to see him since you left school?
Never. I
Oh,
mean,
it's a shame, isn't it?
I mean, I was too proud in those days to ever thank him. I wished I had.
Yeah.
You know, but I was that classic useless teenager, and then didn't think about it much till I got more into diving.
Yeah.
But so I never did thank him. But in an interesting turn of events, I did go out with his daughter for about 6 months.
No way. That's ace. Oh, that's mega. So, in regards to expeditions, clearly the expeditions you are running or part of are massive budgets, logistics, and all the rest of it compared to the kind of stuff I get involved in. You know, we have a maximum of 20 people, maybe in the background, you know, sat here in the UK that have done some of the run-ups, and that maybe about 5 people to do with getting the money in and stuff like that. But where do you even start? Do you come up with an idea ever and then put that to like the commissioning board through, you know, through National Geographic or through BBC, or do you find that they come to you more often than not?
Oh, National Geographic, it's one big project called Pristine Seas.
Yeah.
And I'm the expedition leader for those. It's invented by a man called Enric Sala, a great guy, Enric. He was a professor at Scripps in California, and he realized that every single science paper he wrote felt like he was writing the obituary for the ocean. You know, he wanted to have some real action. So he went to National Geographic with this idea to find the last pristine places in the ocean and protect them. That felt like action. They liked him. He turns out to be a genius fundraiser. So they liked him and the project if he could raise most of the money. And he had a number of expeditions that ran, relatively small compared to what we do now. And then I was running an event at the Royal Society in London. It was a call to action for the British government to help protect pitcairn. And Enric had led the pitcairn expedition. And we met, and I instantly realized that we were going to work together. There was no doubt about it. But we didn't quite know how. And then later on, I was doing an event in Ireland in terrible weather. Jesus, it was sideways rain and all the rest of it. And Enric called, but I could barely understand what he was saying, but I knew he was saying, would I come and lead the expeditions?
Yeah.
So I said yes, not really knowing what I was agreeing to. And our very first one then was up into the Arctic in Franz Josef Land for the Russian government. And that opened my eyes as to how these expeditions are planned. We do about 4 a year, and we analyze the scientific need, what places in the ocean should be protected and why. Parallel to that, we look at the political opportunity and political motivation for each one of those countries. What is it that's driving them to protect their region? A good example might be the Seychelles, where I've worked for many years, and they were looking to establish 30% of their EEZ to be protected, but they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
So working with the Nature Conservancy Council, they worked out a way to offset a big amount of their international debt in return for protecting 30% of their ocean.
Well,
and they couldn't do that unless the science was done in the remote islands. Yeah. So then we went and did the science in the remote islands. So basically, it's a partnership between Pristine Seas and the country that wants their waters protected. And we've done 30 of those.
Jeez. That's a cracking idea, though. If you can offset something like that, like get rid of that debt.
Yes, that works well.
Yeah.
And then others, I mean, you know, and then each expedition comes out of our funding. We fund all that. So it's through National Geographic and other philanthropic groups that sponsor us.
Yeah.
And then we just pay, you know, charter a ship. So it's a big logistics exercise, as you say. You've got to organise the partnerships, permit, of course, big job with the permits. And then there's my team, which is a team of scientists and media, combined with the in-country science team and sometimes media team. Yeah. And based on that and the requirements, then we organise a ship charter and all the other bits and pieces, and off we go. So it's a good exercise, and you know, it's wonderful to do that stuff, but it's nothing like when you're finally there, everything's on board, everything's commissioned, all the people are there, and then we slip lines and it becomes a live, beautiful, living thing. But sometimes that's maybe 3 years or even 4 years after we first started it. So it's a big, long chain of keeping things moving.
Mm. So I've got 2 questions that's going to come out of that. Firstly, you seem to be awake an awful lot. So do you go on holiday ever?
I do go on holiday, and a lot of that depends on what I've just done. Like if I've been in a beautiful, warm place, with relatively straightforward diving and baking hot, then I'm anxious for a bit more of an adventure, say a cold place or something. Or if I've really been up against it in difficult conditions, then inevitably I'll look for a warm, easy trip afterwards. So that's how I tend to go. It seems like an active progression. Yeah, of course.
I get you. And the second question is then, for someone like myself that enjoys the planning, the management, if you will, and the organising of getting a group of people together to do something, where would you start if you were me? I mean, to just run a little mini expedition with a purpose, which is what an expedition is ultimately, isn't it? It's a trip with a purpose to have a result. Where would you start?
Yeah, well, I'd do what you're doing. You're following your nose. You might have an interest. Let's say you've got an interest in shipwrecks or an interest in a particular element of marine biology or element in history, or there's something about a certain region. You can't define it, but it just inspires you and you just want to be there. Then it's nice to look at a different angle. So perhaps, if you go to a place that others have been to and you know a fair bit about it, so you're a well-informed traveler, the next step is what could you add to the knowledge? Right. And that's always a nice moment. It could be that someone has dived this particular region quite regularly, but you haven't, and your team might have a very different way of approaching the understanding of it. Perhaps it needs a scientist, so you bring along a small science team or just one scientist. That can make an enormous difference. Or it needs recording properly. So the trick is to invite and bring along a really good photographer or filmmaker, So then you would bring to that region your perspective and a new set of knowledge. And the other thing to do is I've always enjoyed this, is find people that really do know this region well and make sure you take them. Yeah. So you've sort of covered both grounds. You've got this idea that's yours. You own this idea. It's your beautiful expedition. But you've got someone from the past who can set the scene for you and give you a baseline. And you've got other skills in there, maybe scientists or filmmakers. And it's not, you don't have to have a big trip. You can have one filmmaker, one scientist, and one person who knows the region, and then half a dozen of you, and you've got a team of 10 people that can be quite specific. So the take-home message there is work out what you can do to make a difference in that region.
All right, that's fantastic. So living near Hodge Close, then I have read that you like nipping in there every now and again on your own.
Yeah, I like Hodge Close. It's a great spot because it's not far from home. And it's worth the run up and getting around the back and parking. Yeah. And I've always enjoyed Hodge Close because it's got a sense of adventure. It's got a real presence about it. And I've done a fair bit of climbing on those walls in Hodge Close too. So I've got the sort of diving, climbing thing going on. And it's one of them places where I was there some years ago with a good mate, and we'd come up near the center, and we were just drifting there, having a natter at the end of the dive. Yeah. Some kids started throwing bunches of stones at us from the top. Jeez. And the right thing to do there is just sort of keep strong and go down or something. Yeah. But of course, he swore at them like a maniac, which meant we had like tons of incoming flipping. The worst dive I've ever had at Hodge Close, but generally I love it. Yeah.
I've only been there once. I've not dived it, but just round the corner is Cathedral Cavern. Yep. So we've walked through there umpteen times. I took my kids there when they were little, and we did a walk. We always go sort of between Christmas and New Year, a group of us. I try and take a few people that wouldn't go out in the wilderness as such, or the countryside, with their wives. So it's a nice, easy walk, and I took them through there, and we ended up walking past Hodge Close, and one of the lads who used to be a diver, he said, "I'm sure I've dived here," and we did some research and worked out what it was. So I've got an invite in to go in September, I think. But not being cave cavern qualified, I suppose we are, but cave qualified, I'm not. So I'm kind of like, is it worth going just to get a bit of depth and just see what it's about?
Yeah,
What do you think?
definitely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't need to go into the cave system there to have a good dive. I've
right.
always enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're a sensible diver, so even if you popped into the cavern just a bit and had a sniff around, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great place to be.
Ace. Well, we may have to have another brew at some point then next.
Yeah,
Let
please.
Let me know when you're home.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So looking through some of your sort of portfolio of work and stuff, I wouldn't say the most standout picture, but one of. It looks like you were inside Buzz Lightyear. You know the submersible you're in. It's got a great big dome on the front, but you don't really see the back unless you watch the video. You just see this picture of the front. The most beautiful blue surroundings. But you are like Buzz Lightyear's head.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
One of our, I mean, we charter ships of all kinds and sizes, but the smallest one that we charter is called the Argo, and that's out of Costa Rica. It's run by the Undersea Hunter Group, and it holds the deep sea submarine, that one. And it's a really great tool for us. It's got an operating depth at 400 meters, which means that we cover down to about 50 meters with scuba surveys. At 25 meters, we run our big remote pelagic cameras. Yeah. At the very bottom, we run our remote drop cameras. And these are the ones that have been all the way to Mariana Trench and back up. Wow. In the twilight zone, sort of between 60 and 100 meters, we don't do too much of that diving, but we do it when we have to or need to fill in some science gaps. Yeah. And that's typically trimix with rebreathers. Yeah. But we need a lot of support. We've got to be super careful on those dives, so we try not to do too many. And then the big studies that we can do around about, sort of 100 to 400 meters, we use a submarine for. It's great. You're down for 3 hours. Yeah. Scientists can do huge long transects. I can be in there reporting on stuff. And especially handy, we can take global leaders down. They can often fall in love with their own waters for the first time ever. And then that helps them protect it. So
they do say to protect it, you must love it, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah. So the submarine gets a lot of use for that, and we really enjoy working with the Undersea Hunter Group and the Deep Sea Submarine. It's a great one.
How do you go on for like snacks and that? Have you got a little kettle in there and stuff?
Yeah. No, it's only 3 hours, so it's not that long, and the trick is to make sure you don't need a pee, really.
Yeah, I just imagine so. Yeah, we'll get a little bottle out.
Yeah.
So I've seen quite a few of the dives that you've done, but certainly being in either of the polar regions, a big deal for me is keeping warm under the water. Have you got any tricks you can tell me?
Yeah, I do. I mean, firstly, you got to have the right dry suit. I think I've had every single dry suit going over the years. And I started ice diving in the States, and that was all wetsuit ice diving. And the trick there was because there's this method. Do you put warm water in the suit or not? There's this wonderful debate about getting it flushed out with warm water first. I always did, particularly down in the gloves. But then with the dry suit going, you've got to have a good suit, and everyone's got their preference. For me, it's the O3 suits. I really like the O3 suits. They're very robust, very simple, very warm, and they seem to fit me very well. So good underwear, good stuff, nothing too tight. And I like to wear a thin underhood underneath the main hood. That makes a big difference. Right. If I can't find my underhood, I just sometimes wear just a Speedo swim hat. Swim cap works really well. And then again, if I'm using wet gloves, then flood them with warm water first, or good dry gloves. And that's it. And it's all about being super, super organized. I've often in Antarctica been cold before the dive, warm on the dive, and then cold afterwards. So it's all down to being, well, like anything. If you want to be comfortable, you've got to be organised.
Yeah. Do you prefer a neoprene dry suit then?
I do. Yeah. I like neoprene dry suits. I mean, I've had a couple of Vikings over the years. I remember buying the 90X 90X Viking when it was the suit to have. Right. I like the neoprene. It's a good mix for me because then I'm not wearing too much underwear. I'm wearing enough, a couple of layers, and then the suit has got enough insulation that between that I feel a bit freer and move a lot. And I've got the suit quite big; it's quite broad on me. Yeah. So if I'm on the surface, shoveling snow or helping to cut the hole or humping gear around, I can move freely and easily. So yeah, the neoprene seems to work for me well.
I'm in a trial. I'm in a membrane suit now.
Uh-huh.
But I was always warmer in the neoprene. I feel more comfortable in the kind of diving I do wearing the suit that I've got now. But always was warmer. I can't speak highly enough of how warm I was in that. Just once. I guess there's different horses for courses, isn't there? So one suits my kind of diving better.
And then just last year, I actually bought heated vest and gloves.
Yeah.
So that was a real big step to get them with the big battery, you know.
Yeah.
So it just means that on the ride back in the boat, if it's a thumping, longer, more gruesome ride back in the boat than you expected, then you've got that core heat, you know.
Just wearing a full face mask, because obviously a lot of the commentary and stuff that you do, you're actually on camera talking underwater, aren't you? So does the full face mask add a degree of warmth because more of your face is sort of covered up?
It does a bit, but I must say that it's one of them things that with the ice diving, I typically prefer a half mask and keep things really simple in case there's a free flow or something like that. You know, you're not switching blocks and all this other messing around. You can just literally put the other one in or work it out, and you can keep it nice and dry and as warm as possible before you go in. Whereas the face mask is another thing unless you have to have comms. But like the full face mask, it's great to be able to have a proper chat underwater and you know, chat to your partner, chat to your scientist, whatever is going on, chat to the surface, hear the surface. It's a terrific thing having a good face fight. I mean, even with the cave diving for BBC Oceans, I was wearing a full face. But then what I did, obviously, I had another regulator in my pocket, thread, a long octopus, and a mask in my pocket as well. So if something went wrong with that full face, that was part of our bailout, yes.
Yeah, it's a bit of a faff in it to have to put two on, but if it needs must, isn't it?
Of course.
So what's scarier, fighting off a polar bear that falls on your tent or a moray eel that's hanging off your ear?
Yes, they both made me jump, that's for sure.
I bet.
But the eel on the ear was a funny thing. I mean, who'd ever, you know, I've dived a lot with moray eels, and we know them back in their holes and occasionally free swimming. But diving at Clipperton, which is Pacific, you know, Mexican waters, who never seen anything like it. Just literally thousands of large morays around. So there were so many of them and they would like to go in between the BCD and up your arms, and so we were constantly taking the gear off, drifting around about 28 meters, taking the gear off, putting it back on so we could carry on. And inevitably, of course, one was going to bite me on the ear. So I actually thought I'd lost the flipping ear.
Yeah.
You know how you feel under. I thought I'd lost a big lump.
The mouth looks like a sharp's bucket, doesn't it? About 100 different needles everywhere. Did it actually get you, or did it just?
Yeah, it's really good bite. So I'm up at the surface trying to do a decent bit to camera with. But there, I suppose, was much more frightening because I mean, you know, you're going to be all right with a bit of ear, but that polar bear jumped on me up in the Arctic at the Northwest Passage on my tent. Then I figured I was just a very, very lucky man.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a film with Leonardo DiCaprio. I forget what it's called now. It'll come to me in a bit.
Revenant,
yeah, where he's attacked by a bear, and you think, I tell you what, I wouldn't know what to do. Well, I'd behind a tree dead still. But if you're in your tent minding your own business, just because there's a snowstorm and it falls on you, you can't do anything, can you?
No, I was very lucky.
What did you do? Did you just sort of let it?
Well, it was a beautiful night, and we camped on a beach up there at Northwest Passage, and I'd been working really long and hard getting things set up.
Yeah.
Finally, things were organised. It was a gorgeous night, one of those sort of zero, say, temperature, with very light falling snow, which is a bit like white noise inside the tent. Beautiful, easy, peaceful, no wind or anything. And it was warm, so I had my sleeping bag completely unzipped. There was only like half in it, sort of laying naked there and just about asleep. And bright daylight, of course, it's 24-hour daylight up there in the summer. And then I came round to hearing my own breath, just going woof. And this 900-pound bear had obviously smelt me in the tent. and had gone for me, and all its sharp bits had missed me, but its right front leg, had got my head and elbow and squashed me down.
Yeah.
And then the tent sprang up. It was all ripped. Tons of snow came in.
Yeah.
And I instantly knew that it had been a bear on me, but I was miraculously all right. And I sat there in the tent, naked, snow coming in, wondering, where is he now? I just kept really quiet. My heart rate was really high, obviously, and I was worried about that because bears are sensitive, and I wondered if I would he would sense me as prey. Yeah. So I slowed my heart rate down and just sat there for a little while, went to the front of the tent and opened up the inner, and then very, very carefully opened up the outer to stick my head out. And I was faced with this enormous white head with these two brown eyes right at the door. So we stared at each other for a little while. Then he went off up the beach, maybe 20 meters. And I then went to go for I got in for the rifle and flares and got my down coat.
So you didn't put your underpants on first?
No, I didn't.
Get the gun out.
And then in that rustling of me getting my gear ready, he came running back at the tent fast. Ooh. And I figured I'd had it. But then he just walked around the tent for 45 minutes.
Jesus.
And then he went out on the sea ice and I could breathe again.
Mate, that's epic, isn't it? Have you been pretty lucky to sort of avoid injury through your career? Because that could be a bit of a showstopper, can't it, really?
Yeah. I mean, I've had injuries here and there, but they've, touch wood, been relatively minor injuries. But I mean, try and look after myself.
Absolutely. So you're staying pretty fit on your penny farthing?
Yeah, I love the penny farthing. I've got one here in Geneva and one there in England.
What sort of made you go for one of them?
Like cycling,
Yeah. My wife's into a bit of cycling. We've both got mountain bikes, but she's out on hers sort of every day. I just can't. I really can't. I'd love to. I'm making excuses now, Paul. So just tell me to shut up talking.
Penny farthing's been great. I learned to ride the penny farthing for BBC for the Wild's Way programme, and bought one immediately. Got it here, and funny enough, I was out on it on Sunday actually for a lovely ride. So yeah, I like it. It's something. It just makes you smile when you get on that thing.
There's a bloke near us, and he goes up and down the main road, and he either has one of them that you're almost laid back, laid right down, and the feet are out in front of you, or he's got one of these penny farthings. But every now and again, he'll dress up, tweed cap on. He looks like he's out of 1920s or something, just going to the mill for work. It's quite funny. But it is quite a big one. How tall's yours?
Yeah, it's big, enormous. It's about here.
Wow.
Seats about here. Yeah.
Is it hard to get up and that?
It isn't. It all works surprisingly easy, but it's the first time, as you can imagine. I remember doing it for BBC. It's a terrifying experience the first time.
That's awesome. So what dive trips have you got planned? Anything you can tell me about that's not dead exclusive?
Yeah, well, I mean, personally, it's coming back to England and going down to Chester Cove.
Yeah. And
then going over to St Abbs. That will be my little circuit. It will be the Lake District Fells down to St Abbs, and then over to Chester and over to St Abbs.
Nice.
And then now we were going to be at sea next year, January, February, but it's too early for COVID. So what we've done now, we've normally got the science planning parallel to the political opportunity planning. We've now got a third column, and it's called post-COVID recovery.
Yeah.
Because it's not just our destinations and how they recover from COVID, but because it's the transport on the way and the ship arrangements. So we're juggling quite a lot at the moment so that we can get stuck in again. We'll get stuck in again about mid next year, but we've got 40 expeditions planned, but I can't tell you what's going to be the first one because we don't have a clue.
Do you think COVID's going to have a massive detrimental effect to the way TV's made now?
I think I don't know. I think it will affect television because when you see a program that's obviously been made by not many people on location, it doesn't have the buzz to it. I've watched some decent ones here, but it didn't quite. You've got to have people there. Yeah. But I think it's going to have some positive all-round elements. I mean, like now we've got headlines now that we would have dreamed of a year ago. Headlines saying that all of our health is reliant on the health of everybody else on the planet, which in turn is reliant on the health of nature. Yeah. So all these big pushes that we're part of to protect 30% of the planet by 2030, 50% by 2050, E.O. Wilson's Half Earth. These are all big news now, and that, we would have, broken out the champagne if we'd seen these headlines about the only true vaccine against another pandemic is to protect nature. So we've got a huge amount of benefits coming, and it will be on the educational side, and the fact that, like you and me, we've become semi-professional virtual speakers and stuff. So, and the educational links and the partnerships that are working. So, there are a lot of positives, but there's quite obviously a lot of negatives, and it's a hell of a thing we still don't have a vaccine. Nothing has changed. It's no less dangerous than it ever was. And yet we're sort of beginning to open up, of course. So it's a dangerous time, I think.
Certainly what I've noticed I've just been in Wigan, really, and then we go to the beach on Anglesey and come home. So we've not really interacted with many people outside the town I live in. But it seems people are just kind of bored of it now, and just paying a bit of lip service to it, not even wearing masks. The amount of people I've seen going in shops, and shops don't seem to be bothered. There should be a sign on each shop saying, no mask, no entry. For me, that's what I think.
I think that's why I like Switzerland here, because that's what there are in the shops. We went shopping yesterday.
Yeah.
And going into the big supermarket, there's a sign saying masks are mandatory, and there's the squeegee things with the gel, and there's lines in there to remind you about this 2 meters distance, and everybody's being very good. So we haven't had much leadership from this great government of ours in Britain, have we?
No, even with all this, all the qualifications that are coming out at the minute, A levels last week and GCSEs. My daughter's affected by that. Hers are this week. It just seems so hit and miss. I know it's an unprecedented time, and they didn't really plan for it, and they're trying to do the best they can. But I think what you said earlier about how people over in Switzerland trust what's going on and adhere to what's being asked of them, it's not that way over here at all, I think.
No, absolutely not. They're getting a lot of fierce criticism, but I have to say I think they deserve it.
Well, we could do politics, couldn't we, another day? We'll come back next week for another brew when you've nothing else to do. We'll have a chat about politics.
Well, thanks, Andy.
I do appreciate your time, mate. Thanks very much for coming on. It's been a great chat.
Keep up the great work. Hope to see you diving very soon.
Defo.
Take it easy, mate.
So that brings to an end episode 18 with my friend Paul Rose. Links to all the things we discussed are in the podcast notes. My guest for episode 19 is Autumn Blum. She talks about her work as a cosmetic chemist and her ocean positive brand of skincare products, Stream to Sea. You've been listening to Are You a Scuba Diver? Fancy a Brew podcast with me, Andy the Northern Diver. You can find some more scuba related content on my YouTube channel. The link is in the podcast notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review. If there's someone or something you'd like us to discuss, let us know via our Facebook page. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.